That was Elizabeth Palmer in Moscow reporting. Let's go now to our political panel. Hari Sevugan is in Chicago. He's the former DNC National Press Secretary and currently the principal at 270 Strategies. And David Avella is in Washington. He's the chairman of the conservative organization GOPAC. All right, gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being with us. A lot to get through tonight.
Thank you.
So I want to just kind of get your quick takes on these topics, starting with you, David. Some pretty powerful rhetoric from Russian President Vladimir Putin. What do you make of his comments?
Interesting comments, but the more important comments coming from Vladimir Putin is what he thinks of Donald Trump, because that is who our next president will be, that he's going to have to deal with on relations with the U.S. And if you think about it, Donald Trump, in many of the things he has said, is following the same path that George Bush followed and that President Obama followed, in that they tried to have good relations with Vladimir Putin and to make relations between the U.S. and Moscow strong, and both found out that he was tough to deal with. And we're going to see, is Donald Trump able to deal with Putin better than our last two presidents have been able to deal with him?
Hari, what do you think?
Look, I couldn't think of a worse character witness for Donald Trump than Vladimir Putin, but he continues to insist on supporting President-elect Trump, just as President-elect Trump continues to insist on supporting President Putin. It's one of the great bromances of our time. But I think the credibility of Mr. Putin on some of these issues, whether he's talking about fake news, where he's got folks in Moldova, like teenage boys, sitting around creating fake news, and he's killed journalists, and he has state news outlets, and he's talking about fake news. He just doesn't have the credibility to talk about that.
Well, Hari, Putin went so far as to accuse the Obama administration, as you know, of trying to delegitimize a Trump presidency. When you hear something like that, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, I think that's the furthest thing from the truth. I think the president has gone out of his way to be gracious and to ensure a smooth transition for the president-elect. And I think he's done that in the face of criticism from folks on the left. But the president believes in democracy and wants to see a smooth transition of power. So when I hear that, it flies against the face of the facts.
What do you think, David?
President Obama has worked to make a peaceful transition with President-elect Trump, and which is one of the great things about our democracies, this peaceful transition of power. But Hari's comments are kind of out of line again with what even President Obama tried to do coming in. He tried to have a strong relationship with Moscow, and they are still a formidable force in the world, and particularly in the Middle East. And Donald Trump is not the only incoming president who's tried to have a good relationship with Russia, and we're going to find out if he's any more successful than President Obama was able to be and that President Bush was able to be.
I don't think Donald Trump's in a position to be tough on Russia. We've seen that he's compromised in a lot of ways, whether it's conflicts of interest or just this obsession he has with Mr. Putin. It's clear that he's not ready to be tough on Russia.
Well, President-elect Trump did, as you both know, say that there is a possibility that he may not get along with President Putin. We will see what happens with that. But on another issue, Hari, I'd like to begin with you. President Obama on Tuesday commuted sentences of over 200 inmates, including Chelsea Manning. Manning famously gave Army documents to WikiLeaks back in 2010 and was convicted of treason and espionage. I wonder, first of all, what your reaction to that is, and what would you say to critics of the president that say this is action that is unwarranted and they don't understand why, in fact, the president chose to do this?
Well, listen, this president has prosecuted more cases of leaking government secrets than all other presidents combined. So there's no doubt that he's been tough on these issues. I think he showed an act of mercy here with Private Manning, and that's what he's done, and used his clemency and pardon powers in a way that I think advanced his priorities. That said, the interesting thing here that not a lot of people are talking about is Julian Assange volunteered, and WikiLeaks volunteered, that Assange would allow himself to be extradited if Chelsea Manning's sentence was commuted. So we'll see where that goes, but I think that's a very important point that a lot of people are missing.
David, what about that?
Well, President Obama is not the first president leaving office to make controversial pardons. And for many people, as you noted, this is a head scratcher in that a lot of people's personal security was exposed by Manning. And why he did this, I suppose the White House has let a little bit out, but particularly given, as Hari commented, how strong President Obama has been, at least rhetorically, against hackers and against actions like this. Again, this is a head scratcher on why he took this action.
Yeah, our Defense Department reporter, our national security reporter, David Martin, reports that Defense Secretary Ash Carter did not even support that move. Let me move on to this. President-elect Trump has made several comments on policy recently that deviate from the GOP orthodoxy, including his promise of insurance for everybody. David, are the president-elect and the Republican Party in sync?
Yes, just because there is a difference of how we get to common goals doesn't mean we don't ultimately get to good legislation and good laws that achieve what the president and Republicans who are now in Congress campaigned on, which is getting the economy moving, getting wages going, replacing Obamacare with a system that helps bring down costs and gives better quality of care to Americans. And while they may have different ideas, which is a good thing, not a bad thing, there's not always much diversity in opinion in the Democratic caucus, but in the Republican caucus, you can have different ideas. And you bring them to the table and you negotiate them out and you come up with good legislation. And that's what we're going to see. But let me add one other thing, particularly when it comes to Obamacare. This version of health care will be different than the last one, in that the Democrats were perfectly fine with being the only people in the room to make the decisions on legislation and pass something. And Republicans are going to have at least 8 to 10 Democrats who have actively already said they want to find a better way than what Obamacare is on health care. So they have some allies in Democrats who want to make the system better. So we're going to have bipartisan legislation when it's all said and done.
Let me turn to Paul Ryan's tax plan. Mr. Trump has also criticized a cornerstone of Speaker Paul Ryan's tax plan, calling it, quote, too complicated. Hari, do you think that the president-elect is understanding the GOP's positions on issues like this, or is there perhaps something else behind these kind of comments?
Yeah, I mean, that's the border adjustment tax that Paul Ryan introduced, and he was stymied there. He was stymied on his efforts by the president-elect to do what has been a Republican priority for a very long time, which is entitlement reform. I think what the House caucus and Speaker Ryan are finding is that the president-elect is just as unpredictable with them as he is with the rest of the world. We'll wait to see how that plays out. But certainly, I think they're not aligned.
How do you see it, David?
Thank goodness we are now talking about tax reform. And as we just discussed, ideas are going to come to the table. And maybe in the beginning, people have different ideas, but that's what American democracy is about. And that's why there is an executive branch and a legislative branch, and both have their ideas and both work towards ultimately getting good legislation passed. But again, what are we talking about? We're talking about tax reform when over the last 8 years we've talked about, whether it be through Obamacare or whether it be what's happened in the energy industry, we're moving away from who can we tax next to put more money in government coffers. And instead, we're talking about how do we do things to put more money in Americans' pockets so that we stimulate the economy and create jobs. It's a good thing for America.
David, I wonder, this is a president-elect who has a very different negotiating style, a very direct line with his Twitter following, millions of followers. How does that factor into the equation here, into the normal legislative process?
Certainly, he has brought a new dynamic to communicating to the table, and that is going to be a factor that is new ground for everyone. And we don't know today how that's going to play out, but he will, as he has shown, he is willing to use it to get his ideas passed and to rally support for his ideas. Certainly, we have seen it having some impact on members of Congress, but still too early to tell what final legislation is going to look like.
Hari, from your perspective as a Democratic strategist, I wonder, how do any potential disagreements among Republicans then position Democrats going forward?
Well, I think Democrats are going to be looking for ways that they can advance their own agenda in the next 4 years, and short of that, ensuring that we don't take the country backwards by advancing Republican ideas that are going to have that effect. So where those divisions exist and Democrats can slow the train down, that's what they'll do.
All right, Hari Sevugan.
Not unlike what Republicans have done.
All right, Hari Sevugan in Chicago and David Avella in Washington. Gentlemen, thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.